Hey, welcome back everybody. Happy Saturday. Great to see you. And we've got a lot to talk about in today's video as we are looking at a pretty potent pattern change, I think, coming on down the horizon towards the middle of the month. And I think this is what's finally going to switch us from this very dry kind of warm weather we've been seeing in the east over really what feels like the past month to a much more winter-like pattern here going towards the middle of November. Now, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Gerald. I am a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte in my junior year here. So again, on the past the second half of that educational journey, and I'm very excited again to have you here again. It means a lot, and if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do so. Hit that bell for the latest notifications. It's free of no charge, so definitely a great way to stay up to date. And that'll notify you every time I post a video with the latest model guidance and analysis of that guidance. Also, go ahead and like the video and comment. That helps this video reach others and also just means a lot to me as well. So you can kind of, get a bit of a double whammy doing that. So with that said, let's go ahead and start talking about the weather because, again, we do have a lot to discuss in today's video. Now, we're going to start with a zoomed out look. And then we are very briefly going to touch on the tropics, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the tropics because, quite frankly, I'm kind of over it, and there are no immediate threats. Now, there are some things we're watching that I will talk about, and should those flare up more coming on down the road, then we'll discuss them more. But until then, we're going to keep the tropics kind of in a short segment, and then we'll start talking about what's currently happening, and then end the video with a pretty long chunk of the long range as we break down some of those model guidance and some of those ensembles. All right, so here's what we're seeing out there right now. We do have this low pressure, and this is what has been responsible for just a ton of snow over portions of Colorado and New Mexico over the past couple of days. I mean, some places got more than 50 inches of snow out of the storm, some places even more than that. So definitely good news for the ski resorts out there and definitely starting to feel like winter out that way. But now this low pressure has become occluded, and what that means is just cold air at the surface and above it have completely wrapped around the low, and that just means that the low has already hit its max strength and will now weaken. And you can see, though, we are still getting some shower and storm activity out of it here as it moves across the central part of the country. Now, below it, this was Hurricane, or I guess still is Hurricane Raphael, but now getting kind of impacted pretty heavily by some wind shear, all due to this upper level low now, again, crossing all these winds out of the Gulf over the storm system. That's helping to keep that guy limited in intensity, and also some dry air will help to really weaken this storm as it slowly moves south towards Mexico over the next couple of days. Now, there are some other things that I do want to mention on the map here. Down into the tropics, I'm going to go ahead and circle one. This tiny little area of thunderstorm activity you see heading towards the Bahamas. We do need to monitor that for some development. Now, the chances are very low, but if there's anything I have learned in the tropics this year is you never say never. In fact, it wasn't long ago we had a storm in this exact vicinity that wasn't expected to develop and then blew up into a hurricane kind of at the last second before hitting Cuba. So we're going to monitor that for sure. And we will talk about it briefly. And then to the south, we do have some widespread general thunderstorm activity into the Caribbean that has shown signs of organization, but again, nothing in the near term that looks super threatening with that. Now, you can also see all this from the National Hurricane Center. We'll start with Raphael here. Again, I guess it is down to a tropical storm now. Sorry, I kind of lied to you there. But again, either way, not going to impact anybody. And you can just see how much it's getting sheared. This is the center of the storm where that little green dot is. And then this is where all of the convection is. So again, getting blown away from the storm system. In fact, over portions of southern Louisiana down near New Orleans, you're seeing a lot of these high-level cirrus clouds. Those are the outer bands, at least in the higher levels of the atmosphere of that tropical system. But again, expected to kind of meander a little bit more before eventually turning south and dying off here over the Bay of Campeche over the next couple of days. And then we can say bye-bye to Raphael. Now, that next storm system, again, it's a small guy for sure, but does need to be monitored right now. It's given about a 10% chance of potential development over the next 7 days or the next 48 hours. So we'll need to watch it. And again, the reason we really need to watch it, I think, specifically is the size of it. Oftentimes, these little compact areas have an easier time of quickly spinning up without us really knowing it. So again, only a 10% chance, but do not be surprised if for some reason this kind of hits a last second hoorah as these smaller storms often do. So definitely monitoring this in the Bahamas as the system moves generally westward over the next couple of days. But right now, it looks like more of a rain event than anything else. And then all of our other areas to the south, nothing from the National Hurricane Center on these areas, indicating that we should be concerned, but we are still going to monitor them because anytime you have any shower or thunderstorm activity in the Caribbean during the month of November, that's the one hotspot really left in the Atlantic. So we will need to watch it for sure. All right, let's time this out for you. Again, watching 3 areas. Here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3 down here. So just kind of monitor these as I move this model ahead into time. This is the latest GFS run from today. And you'll notice Raphael dying out pretty quickly, and then both of these other storms not really developing in the near term. As for the northern one, in fact, it never really develops. And some of that energy, though, could get pulled north, and that could be important later on down the road. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this gets us all the way through the weekend. No storms on the map. Again, maybe Raphael might still be kicking, but at that point, again, on his last leg. But at this point, I think all eyes then kind of turn back to the Caribbean, back to this place where we've seen CAG after CAG or Central American Gyre after Central American Gyre form storms, and the GFS and some other models are indicating that maybe a week or so from now, another storm tries to form down here. And I believe this would be Sarah is the next name on the list, if my memory serves me correct. And this would be, again, about 5 days or so from now on this model run is when that would form. Now, I'll move this all the way ahead into time just to show you. Again, it eventually moves into Central America, brings a lot of rain, but doesn't bring a ton of impacts into the tropics. So really what we know right now about this is that we don't know much about it is honestly the best way to put it here whenever it comes to that next potential. But what I will say is we do still have warm sea surface temperatures. We still have moist environment down here, and wind shear values look to be low. And I didn't bring all that up today because, again, I'd be beating a dead horse for the next 5 days as we talk about potential development. Just know conditions will be favorable, and because of that, some of our ensemble members do develop a storm system. These are the GFS ensemble members. Most of these members do develop something. This is over the next 10 days. So the good news, you don't see any members getting up towards the United States. Again, this is Raphael, so kind of ignore that. But we will need to watch that, especially if you happen to be watching down here into Central America. Definitely could be a storm system that is worth mentioning for you folks. And the European as well shows it here with a lot of its ensemble members, and more Euro members pull it north towards the Gulf. So we will have to watch that. And climatologically speaking, that would make sense. It's very often when things do form down here very late into the season like we are, that they sometimes do get pulled north like this. So we'll watch it, but right now, nothing that you really need to be concerned about, but it is worth mentioning here as we go ahead into time. All right, that's enough of the tropics. Let's move to the fun stuff and kind of start talking about what's happening now, why it's happening, and then what's coming on down the pipeline. Because again, I do see what I think could be a pretty impressive pattern change coming on down the horizon. Now, this is a new thing I'm trying to start on the channel a little bit, where I start with the upper level winds and the surface winds on current conditions. I think it's a great way to kind of share some of my knowledge here onto you folks and kind of explain why the weather happens a little bit more than just it's going to rain or it's not going to rain. So these are our current 500 millibar height maps. This just shows winds in the upper levels, okay? So 500 millibars, if you don't know what that means, 1,000 millibars is average sea level pressure, 900 millibars is a little bit above the ground, 800 millibars is a little bit higher, and then as you get smaller millibar-wise, that's higher up in the atmosphere. So 500 millibars is halfway in the atmosphere in terms of mass. So again, just kind of what that means. I know a lot of people say, 200 millibars, and then people are probably thinking, well, what does that even mean? This just means in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. What are our winds doing? Well, you can see that storm system perfectly in the mid to upper levels, the one that we're currently dealing with. And you see all of these winds on the right-hand side, and you'll notice how these barbs kind of separate a little bit. We call this diffluence in the world of meteorology, and that's creating a lot of lift. And that's why we're seeing all of this thunderstorm and shower activity kind of in this shape around the storm system. It's where these winds are separating aloft that creates lift at the surface. And if I keep that area circled, in fact, let me circle it a little bit better here, kind of like this. And then if I go to our surface map, you'll notice that's basically exactly where the rain is on the map. So again, kind of fun how that works out. It's always fun whenever you draw something on one map, show the next, and then it kind of lines up a little bit. Always super cool. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. But other than that, it's just a big ridge over much of the country, a little bit of troughing here in the northeast, meaning our upper level winds are kind of scooping down here. And some cold air is getting trapped into this region, and that will be important. That will bring, or already is bringing, high pressure on the left-hand side of that trough. That's where high pressure normally forms. And that could bring some cold air damming into the weekend through portions of the mid-Atlantic. So that's kind of your daily dose of meteorology. In fact, maybe that's what I'll call this segment, your daily dose of meteorology. Again, though, like I said, all of that lines up perfectly. Here's that high pressure I just talked about. Here's some of that cold air damming beginning. And then here's our storm system with that rain around it. So with that said, let's go and time out what this is going to do over the next little bit. Now, I will briefly start, though, with our watches, warnings, and advisories. Let's start in the northeast. Again, we have that high pressure moving in. That's going to bring dry air. That's going to bring windy conditions. And we are going to have a fire threat through much of the northeast, from Boston all the way down to Washington, D.C., back towards Pittsburgh, up through Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York City, even through Long Island, going to have the chance for some fire activity today. So we will absolutely need to watch for that. Other than that, things remain quiet until we get to the Mississippi River Valley, Louisiana, all the way northbound into Missouri, up through Iowa, and then into the north central plains. We do have some rain working on through, and even a little bit of snow left over into the Denver metro area. A couple winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings here for today, as what is left of the storm system slowly pulls out of here. And then I will also mention shower activity returning to the Pacific Northwest. And this will be the start of a new trend of more active weather up that way. All right, let's time it out for you here. This is through this afternoon. Again, a rainy day for a lot of folks out into the central part of the country, from Nebraska all the way back down into Louisiana. Really just this entire zone here. It's going to be a showery day. It's going to be a pretty wet day. Meanwhile, we'll be dry east of the Appalachia chain. Again, this cold air damming working through. Here's that high pressure. Here's that ridging extending down due to that high pressure. And again, bringing some cooler temperatures, especially compared to what we saw. And really, more so, the humidity is getting brought down, or that dew point value is bringing those muggy conditions much lower, which is going to be good news for a lot of folks because, I mean, honestly, yesterday felt like summer or a late spring day here, at least in Charlotte. So it will be nice to get some of that drier air. Then we go through this evening. Again, all this rain and all these showers move eastbound. I will mention we do have a bit of a flooding risk down here into Louisiana. You're kind of getting a squeeze play between this low pressure and then our low pressure from Raphael. That is bringing a ton of moisture with a lot of lift down here. So do not be surprised to see a flooding threat, maybe even a couple strong storms mixing in down that way. So again, just mentioning that for you folks this afternoon and into the overnight. Very heavy rain training over some of the same areas will become a problem. All of that rain moves east overnight, and by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning, this is 8 a.m. Eastern time, again, all this rain has moved eastbound a little bit. So here's our low pressure again, not very strong at this point, but along all of that diverging side of that upper level trough, like I mentioned earlier, still getting plenty of moisture content, plenty of showers, and again, a small flooding threat for some folks, as that will be training over some of the same areas. That's Sunday morning. By the time we get to Sunday afternoon, this rain starts to kind of cross the Appalachia chain a little bit here, with some rain from New York all the way down even to the Carolinas. Could see some dreary scattered showers, especially as that cold air gets stuck at the surface from that damming that happens today. So again, really just a kind of rainy pattern over the rest of the weekend, depending on where you're at. It's not going to be a washout for everybody. In fact, today's going to be quite nice for some folks. But then by the time we get to tomorrow and overnight tomorrow, as pictured here, the storm system and all of the rain with it begins to work eastbound. Now, out west, the story here, well, again, still some snow this afternoon through Colorado and Wyoming. And while that's happening, shower activity returns up into Washington State, into the Seattle area. And all this will continue throughout the day today. Now, eventually, our storm system over Colorado moves out of the west. But by the time that's happening, those showers continue this evening and overnight tonight through Washington State, Oregon, NoCal, and then eventually into the northern Rockies, getting some mountain snow by the time we're getting into your Sunday morning and afternoon. And that sets the stage for our next big storm system with more heavy rain and big mountain snow. This is overnight Sunday working into the PNW there. And then this gets us pretty far overnight into the early hours of Monday, at least Eastern time. So this is still technically late Sunday night for you folks out west. But again, that's the start of the next storm system, which we will discuss. All right, let's time out the rest of this storm system, and then let's talk about that long range. Again, I'm sure many of you are excited to hear about it. I'm excited to talk about it. So let me back this up just a little bit. This is kind of where we left off. We'll pick up Monday morning, and here's going to be the pattern Monday morning. It's going to kind of be a 1-2 punch. You'll notice one storm system up into Canada. Now, unfortunately, it's far enough north that we're not going to see any snow out of that one in the United States. But notice what's behind it. You see these blue lines? This is a trough. Again, anytime you see a trough, that is indicative of cold air and usually a storm system on the right-hand side of that trough or the diverging side. Again, I talked about where we get that lift on these troughs. This is where, again, Monday morning, we are going to have a storm with cold air funneling behind it. And in fact, here's the cold front from that low pressure that you can pick out on the surface map here. Monday morning. Now, all of the lift and all of the rain and all of the not so fun stuff is still well out ahead of this. This is, again, Monday morning in the east, still a pretty rainy mess. And even out into the Pacific Northwest, a rainy mess with that next storm system. But we move this ahead into time into the middle of the week, and here comes that storm system, and it does move through the Northeast. Now, it doesn't bring a lot of lift, but what it does do is bring a pretty nice cold front. So you'll notice again, see how these blue lines here are curving down, and even they turn into red lines, but they're still curving down. This tells me we're getting an influx of cold air during the early part of this week through the eastern United States. And here's the high pressure that's going to supply that cold air southward. So I do think, Monday, Tuesday, we're going to get a bit of a cool down, especially in the Northeast. But I do think some of that filters down the Appalachia chain here. Again, we do get some more cold air damming early in the week. Now, as that's happening, again, a very snowy scene in the mountains of the Northern Rockies, valley rainfall for everyone else. But we'll get this even further ahead into time here. And you'll notice here comes another storm system that forms. And this kind of comes out of the Rockies. You'll notice kind of follow the Rockies, follow that rain, notice that low pressure forming into Canada. And then this gets into the United States and moves into the Northeast by next Thursday. And you'll notice we have some snow breaking out. So this is what I was talking about. Again, we've got some cold air getting established early this week. And then we have another storm system coming in later in the week. That could spell some snowy, shenanigans. But more importantly, there's another piece that I want to talk about here. So here we go. This is Wednesday morning. This is that next storm system. You'll notice this trough. And at this point, again, warm air tries to return to the eastern United States. You'll see that on the GFS here. Tries to warm back up again. But there are a couple pieces on the map I want you to notice. Again, we have kind of two areas of low pressure indicating some cooler air into the north central United States. At the same time that that's happening, we have another kind of trough back out into the Atlantic. And notice what happens between these two pieces of energy during next week. That big shot of cold air slings into the United States right through the Northeast. And what happens is we get some phasing or just some pieces of energy that kind of combine out of both of these pieces over the North Atlantic come next Thursday. And those merge together to form a much bigger pocket of cold air and potentially a pretty large storm system in the weekly time frame. Now, that might not be the end of it as well. I'm going to this further ahead into time on the GFS. Look at this. Another storm system flies through the Northeast about 10 days from now, and then about 10 to 15 days from now. And again, I know this is well out there. Trust me. We get a big-time storm system forming over the east. So what's the point of me showing all this stuff well out there? Well, it's not to tell you specific details on a storm, but what it does tell us is the models are hinting at a pattern change, and the GFS isn't the only model, folks. I'll show you the European as well. Again, picking up kind of where we left off. Same setup during the middle of this week. We've got a big-time low-pressure system and storm over the North Atlantic. We get a dip down here into the Great Lakes, and just like the GFS, the European combines these two, but this time the European gets it much closer to the United States. So this would bring a more likely scenario for snowfall, windy conditions, and just an impactful storm in general about a week from now. And you'll notice in that same time frame another big trough dipping out west. But unlike the past couple of weeks where these troughs have kind of gotten stuck out west, the models are a little more keen to bringing them eastbound. And unfortunately, this model only goes out 10 days, but you'll notice that kind of moves east a little bit closer towards the eastern half of the United States. So again, a sign of things to come potentially. And again, I feel more and more confident by the day that we are going to see a pattern change in maybe the 10 to 15 day time frame, but it'll really start within the next week, and then I think kind of hit harder as we get closer towards the middle and the end of November. All right, I know that this map is kind of cluttered a little bit, but I need to zoom it out a little bit. I'll zoom back in a second. But let's talk about this first storm system. And again, this is the nearest one. This would be next Wednesday or Thursday. So let me pull this ahead into time. Again, here is that big cold front moving through on Tuesday that I talked about. And then we will pick up right here on Wednesday afternoon. Here's one storm system. Here's the one I circled earlier in the upper levels. And here's kind of a mess of storms back out into the Atlantic. And watch what happens again as those upper level pieces of energy phase together. We get lower level pieces of energy to work together, and we get a powerful storm system here to get slingshot back into the northeastern United States here. And that could bring, again, some wintry weather to portions of the Northeast. And I'll zoom it in just a second, but notice how that works through. And then in the long run, again, about 10 days from now, the European shows another storm system crossing the country that could bring some impactful weather. Now, I might have said this was the GFS. So that was the European. I'll show you the GFS next year. Sorry for the confusion there. Same setup, though. We'll pick up at the same time. Again, a big storm system crossing the middle of the country. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit ahead of myself here. Let me back this up. That's a later storm system, but again, goes to show that pattern change I was talking about. Here we go. This is better. So this coming Wednesday, one storm system in the middle of the country, another mess of storms back out into the Atlantic, and same thing happens on the GFS. We get some merging of energy here. And a powerful storm system, very strong on the GFS, a 959 millibar low just off the coast of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So if you're watching from up that way as well, a strong storm could potentially be on the horizon. This is a week from now. Now, the question would be, how far back towards the U.S. and maritime Canada does this get? And should it get far enough, and should this cold air be in place enough, we could get a big-time snowstorm somewhere out of it. And that's something I will be watching. But either way, again, I do think it is the start of a pattern change. And just to zoom this in for you a little bit, here's the European model. Again, here's that first storm system. This is crossing Thursday. And then again, remember, we have all this energy just off screen into the Atlantic. We get that merging of the two. And you'll see what happens here is a big storm system gets brought back into the United States. Very heavy snowfall through portions of the Northeast. And very gusty winds about a week from now. Now, is this what's going to happen? Probably not exactly like this, but again, both models show the general idea, so it's important to talk about, and then that lingers for a while, and here comes our next storm system, and look at that one. That's tracking pretty far south, folks, and bringing some snowfall on that cold side of it, maybe even some severe weather again as well. GFS model, again, same story. Here comes that storm system middle of the week. Again, that's the first cold front. This is what establishes the cold air. You'll see those blue isobars dipping in the east, high pressure settling in. That sets up shop for another storm system with another shot of cold air. GFS brings snow through New England, and especially into upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, as early as next Thursday as kind of a precursor event, then phases and gets that next storm system, you'll notice just off screen here. So again, more of a Canada storm system, but if you look very closely, you'll see that little bit of blue showing up and these very tight isobars and very sharp gradient here. So again, things will change, and this could get moved closer to the United States. It could get moved further away. And then again, well out into time, the GFS, like the European, does show another storm system about 7 to 10 days from now over the central part of the country. Which would be of interest. And then well out into time, again, the GFS really goes haywire and cranks up that lake effect snow machine a little bit past 10 days from now and brings a pretty mega shot of cold air. But, we'll get there when we get there. All right, so what are the chances of this happening? Let's take a look at some ensemble members for snowfall, at least. This is the chance of at least an inch of snow falling within 24 hours. You'll notice early this coming week, the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Rockies, definitely going to get some snow. But then during the middle and end of next work week, a flare-up of snow potential into the Northeast and up through much of Eastern Canada. So it's definitely a distinct possibility. You'll see that kind of shows up there. And then even after that, with that following storm system, you'll notice snowfall chances even break containment of the Rockies and the northern plains of the United States, and then the Great Lakes region get in on higher snowfall chances in the long run. again, indicative of that pattern change. And you'll see the same thing on the European ensemble members. Let me back this up. Again, snowy in the northern Rockies early in the week. Later in the week, chances for snow increase into the areas of New England, especially interior New England, into those higher terrains. Again, would have a shot at snow. And then after that, in the long run, again, 10 plus days from now, a potential big storm system crosses the northern plains, brings some snow there. And then again, you'll notice these usual lake effect snow places. I mean, you can pick them out easy here. All the places you would normally get lake effect start showing up on this map. That tells me both models are thinking a big cold air mass could cross the eastern United States. And another thing I'll tell you, excuse me, for anyone watching in the Great Lakes, is these lakes are kind of on fire right now. We had a pretty warm summer and a very warm late fall. We've yet to have a big cold shot. So when we get one, the instability we see out here is going to be pretty high, and that's going to be conducive for very heavy lake effect snow. All right, temperature map, and I think this is the last one. Let's see what the next map is. I don't know why I have the next map. In fact, we'll skip the next map and we'll end with this one. So again, this weekend, warm for a lot of us, a little bit of that backdoor cold front. So tomorrow, or I guess this afternoon rather, you'll notice this cooler air getting down behind the Appalachia chain and up into the northeast. And then we do get a bit of a warm up early in the week, and then here comes that shot of cold air I talked about during the Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe. That could supply enough cold air for snow during during the end of the work week. Then I think after that, we're going to warm up again a bit. But in the long run, you'll notice things get very cold out west again in the 10-day. And the question is, does that cross east into the United States? And if it does, that would bring, again, the potential for lake effect snow, the potential for low pressure that could bring snow into the plains. Again, would bring the potential for just a much more stormy pattern in general. Alrighty, folks, that's what I got for you on this Saturday. Hopefully you also, did I say Friday at the beginning of the video? I might have. I don't know. It's Saturday either way. So, I don't know. It's been a long week. So, either way, though, y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. Get out there, enjoy the weekend, stay safe, and I'll see you all tomorrow.